This is not just my story. This is a story sent in by one of our incredible viewers who learned a hard lesson. Trust your instincts, always. My name is Eleanor Harrison. I'm 58. My daughter, Julia, brought home Ryan Sterling, handsome, charming, and utterly fake. He was playing a long game to steal everything my late husband left us. He thought his wedding day would be his big payday. He thought he was smarter than the mother-in-law. He was wrong. If you have a story of revenge, a painful triumph, or a shocking discovery, we want to hear it. Send your story to us at womenstoriessigmail.com. Don't forget to subscribe and tell me where you're watching from. Before you hear the devastating truth, let me ask you, what do you do when the man your daughter loves more than anything is a carefully crafted lie? What do you do when your own instincts, the ones that kept you safe for decades, are battling the radiant happiness of your only child? If you're watching this story unfold, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. I love hearing from people who appreciate good revenge served ice cold. But let me back up 6 months, because this disaster didn't happen overnight. Ryan Sterling was playing the long game. And unfortunately for him, I've been playing longer. My name is Eleanor Ellie Harrison, and I'm 58 years old. My world and my life changed 5 years ago when my husband, Robert, passed away. Robert left us more than comfortable. His engineering patents and robust life insurance policy meant that money was never a pressing concern. The house in Willow Creek was paid off. My daughter, Julia, had her college fund converted into a substantial savings portfolio, and I had enough for a very comfortable retirement. We were discreet about our wealth, but in a tight-knit community like Willow Creek, word always gets around about who has what. It started when Julia, who is 30, successful in marketing at a non-disclosed marketing firm, brought home what she called the perfect man. I'm 58, and when something seems too perfect, it usually is. But Julia was a capable adult, and I figured she could handle her own love life. Wrong again. Julia and I have been tight since Robert died. She's the anchor that keeps me grounded. When Ryan appeared, he looked like a character ripped from a glossy magazine. Tall, impeccably styled dark hair, sincere blue eyes, and a confident smile. He drove in a non-disclosed luxury sedan, dressed sharp, and claimed to work in investment consulting. Fancy talk, for I help rich people shuffle money around, I thought cynically. The first Sunday dinner, I watched him work my dining room like a seasoned politician. He complimented my beef bourguignon, asked surprisingly intelligent questions about Robert's engineering legacy, and showed perfect interest in Julia's childhood photos. He brought expensive flowers from a boutique downtown, not gas station carnations. "Mrs. Harrison," he said, taking my hand with both of his in that practiced, warm way that instantly triggered my internal fraud detector. "Julia has told me so much about you. I can truly see where she gets her strength and her incredible poise." Poise? If he only knew my idea of poise was not telling him what I really thought of his oversized charm offensive. But Julia was glowing. Absolutely radiant in a way I hadn't seen since before Robert died. She hung on Ryan's every word, laughed at jokes that weren't funny, and kept shooting me hopeful looks that screamed, "Please like him, Mom." So I smiled and played the charmed future mother-in-law, because that's what moms do. We bite our tongues and hope our instincts are wrong. After the dinner plates were cleared and Julia went to prepare the lemon tart, Ryan settled into Robert's old leather armchair, a power move, I noted, and started a series of casual questions about our financial situation. "How are you managing as a widow, Mrs. Harrison?" he asked, leaning forward with an air of professional concern. It's a lot to handle, especially the long-term planning. Did Julia step in to help with the household expenses after Robert passed? Had you made any significant investment decisions lately? The red flags were multiplying like rabbits, but I kept my voice sweet and my answers vague. We're managing fine, thank you. Robert had everything meticulously organized. I'm sure you are, he said, with that practiced smile that never quite reached his eyes. But if you ever feel concerned or want to explore opportunities to make your capital work harder, I'd be happy to review your portfolio. Family rates, of course. Family rates. We had known each other for 3 hours. The man was already positioning himself for a sale. When Julia returned with my famous lemon tart, Ryan transformed back into the devoted boyfriend. The shift was instantaneous. The man was a chameleon, and I suspected we weren't seeing his true colors. During the dessert, Ryan launched into charming work stories about helping high net worth individuals manage complex portfolios. He casually dropped names of non-disclosed investment firms and mentioned clients with multiple homes and luxury cars. It sounded impressive, yet completely vague. So, who exactly employs you, Ryan? I asked, cutting through the charm with a deliberately precise question. I'm independent, he said smoothly, without missing a beat, though a subtle tightness crossed his jaw. It gives me flexibility to focus entirely on individual client needs rather than corporate mandates. Translation? He didn't work for anyone legitimate, and there was no way to verify his stories. But Julia nodded, like he had just explained particle physics. Love makes you stupid, I realized sadly, while they were outside admiring the sunset over my non-disclosed heritage roses. I did what any sensible mother with deep-seated suspicions does. I Googled him. Ryan Sterling Investment Consulting returned millions of generic results, none matching our Ryan. I added Willow Creek to the search. Nothing. No business license record, no professional certifications listed in any public database, and no LinkedIn profile matching his precise description. For someone supposedly working with wealthy clients and driving an expensive car, Ryan Sterling had remarkably little online presence. Either he was ultra-professional or ultra-suspicious. When they returned, I was innocently sipping tea in my living room. Julia, settling beside Ryan with that particular glow, announced, "Mom, Ryan and I think it's time for me to seriously look at changing my investment strategy." My tea paused mid-sip. What changes? Ryan leaned forward with earnest concern, smoothly taking the lead. Julia mentioned she's keeping her inheritance in traditional low-yield savings bonds. With inflation and the current market volatility, she's essentially losing money yearly. I'm assembling a conservative portfolio for her. Nothing risky, just diversified funds and stable growth opportunities. He wasn't wrong, factually. But something about his delivery triggered my deepest mother radar. Why was my daughter's 6-week boyfriend suddenly managing her entire financial future? Sounds wonderful, I said neutrally, masking the alarm bells ringing in my head. Julia has always been money smart. What I thought? Why is my daughter letting this man, a verified online ghost, touch her money? What I said? I'm sure you'll make good decisions, honey. Because here's a painful motherhood truth. Sometimes you must let adult children make their own mistakes, even when you see disaster approaching. As I dried the last plate, I decided to stop hoping my instincts were wrong. I had to pay closer attention to Mr. Perfect. In my experience, men who seem too good to be true usually are. The question was, what was he hiding? And how could I prove it before he did irreparable damage? The long game had officially begun. 2 weeks later, Ryan was back for the second Sunday dinner, and the red flags were now fluttering aggressively in the gentle Willow Creek breeze. Ryan brought a bottle of a non-disclosed vintage wine that easily cost more than my weekly premium groceries. Now, I'm not one to complain about a good Bordeaux, but this was another piece of the puzzle that simply did not fit his supposed independent consulting income level. "This is absolutely divine, Ryan," I said, holding the heavy bottle up to the light, examining the label of the vintage that was probably older than Julia herself. "A special occasion?" "Every dinner with your wonderful family is special, Mrs. Harrison," he replied smoothly, with the easy charm of a man who's perfected the art of saying something nice that means absolutely nothing. Politicians answer. Julia, unfortunately, beamed like he had just recited a sonnet written exclusively for her. My daughter, who holds a marketing master's and can spot sales pitches from a non-disclosed company, was completely buying whatever Ryan was selling. Love, I realized again, makes you stupid. Throughout dinner, Ryan continued with his vague, impressive-sounding work stories. He spoke of helping high-net-worth individuals with asset allocation and legacy planning. He casually mentioned clients who owned multiple vacation properties in a non-disclosed affluent island chain and luxury yachts. It sounded overwhelmingly impressive and utterly untraceable. "I imagine that level of clientele requires deep connections to established firms," I commented, stirring my soup with deliberate slowness. "So when you say independent, do you mean you left one of the major banking houses to launch your own firm? Or is this a sole proprietorship?" Ryan's smile tightened, just a fraction. "It's a bespoke consultancy, Mrs. Harrison. I found that working under the umbrella of a large and non-disclosed financial institution limited my ability to innovate and truly cater to the specialized needs of my clients. Being independent allows me to be nimbler." Translation: he has no verifiable employment history. But Julia jumped in immediately, defending him with the ferocity of a protective lioness. "It's true, Mom. Ryan is a visionary. He doesn't need to be shackled by corporate structures." I smiled sweetly and let it drop. Arguing would only cement her loyalty to him and make my next actions look like the petty jealousy of an overprotective mother. I needed facts, not feelings. While Ryan and Julia were outside, admiring my non-disclosed heritage roses, a necessary interlude for my investigation, I retreated to my home office and did a more thorough sweep. I searched Ryan Sterling plus investment plus education. The results were astonishingly thin. Ryan Sterling Investment Consulting returned a beautiful but generic website with no physical address, no registered agent, and no Securities and Exchange Commission (SEC) registration. Adding Willow Creek yielded nothing. I dug deeper into his educational claims. Ryan had casually mentioned graduating from a non-disclosed elite university. I searched the alumni directories. Nothing matching his name or graduation year. I searched for professional certifications, certified financial planner, chartered financial analyst. Again, a blank digital slate. For a man supposedly consulting with multimillionaires, Ryan Sterling had remarkably little online presence. He was either the most privacy-conscious professional in the nation, or he didn't exist in any official capacity. When they returned, I was innocently sipping a cup of chamomile tea in the living room, reading a non-disclosed popular novel. "Mom," Julia said, settling beside Ryan on the sofa with that particular glow that signaled important news. "Ryan and I have been talking, and we've decided it's time for me to make some serious changes to how my trust fund money is managed." My heart hammered against my ribs, but I forced my expression to remain placid. "Oh? What sort of changes, honey?" Ryan leaned forward, his blue eyes earnest with professional concern. Julia mentioned that the Robert Harrison Memorial Trust is primarily held in traditional low-risk municipal bonds. That was wise for stability, but with inflation and the current economic climate, that capital is losing purchasing power every year. We've devised a strategy. Ryan smoothly presented his plan, using sophisticated jargon that seemed to mesmerize Julia. We're assembling a more diversified, aggressive conservative portfolio, Ryan continued, gesturing with his hands. A mix of blue-chip tech stocks, some high-yield corporate bonds, and a carefully selected private placement in commercial real estate. Specifically, luxury condos in a non-disclosed affluent Western city. The returns could be substantial, potentially doubling the principal in 3 to 5 years. He looked at me, soliciting approval. It's nothing risky, Mrs. Harrison, just smart repositioning. And since we're marrying, it makes sense for us to start consolidating our financial futures together. Translation: he wants legal access to Julia's money before the wedding. Sounds complicated, I said, trying to keep my voice light and conversational. Julia, you've always preferred simple, transparent investments. What changed? Mom, Ryan's the professional, Julia said, her tone carrying a hint of defensiveness, something she'd never used with me before. He's assembling a fund specifically for us. We'll be partners in this venture. It's perfect. The truth hit me with the cold force of a rogue wave. This man wasn't just dating my daughter. He was financially weaponizing her. He wasn't assembling a portfolio. He was assembling a perfect con. I'm sure you'll both make good decisions, honey, I said, giving Julia a gentle, non-committal smile. Because I knew I couldn't stop her with simple maternal advice. Ryan had built a wall of romantic devotion around her, and my suspicions would only make her retreat behind that wall faster. As they left, I stood by the door, watching the non-disclosed luxury sedan disappear down the street. I didn't dry any dishes tonight. Instead, I walked straight to my home office. I picked up the phone. It was time to stop being the charmed future mother-in-law and start acting like the widow of a successful engineer who knew how to hire the right professionals. The question was no longer if Ryan Sterling was hiding something, but who I should hire to expose it. The detective work had officially begun. Following that second Sunday dinner, the confusion I felt was replaced by a cold, cutting certainty. Ryan Sterling was a fraud. I couldn't risk confronting Julia with unverified suspicions and potentially driving her further into his arms. I needed proof, the kind of evidence that stands up not just in a court of law, but in the court of a daughter's broken heart. I called an old colleague of Robert's, an engineer who had branched into corporate security after retirement. He put me in touch with Detective Sarah Miller, a private investigator known for her discretion and her ruthless efficiency in financial fraud cases. We met the following Tuesday at a non-disclosed local cafe, far from Willow Creek. I watched Detective Miller across the small, marble-topped table. She was in her early 50s, wearing simple, practical clothing, her eyes sharp and utterly devoid of judgment. I spoke for nearly an hour, laying out the timeline, the expensive car, the vague job description, the family rates offer after 3 hours, the blank digital slate, and the unnerving push to manage Julia's inheritance. He sounds like a classic relationship predator, Detective Miller confirmed, nodding slowly as she scribbled notes on a plain notepad. They're called smooth operators. They leverage social charm and perceived success to gain access to a secure financial resource, in this case, your daughter and the Robert Harrison Memorial Trust. But why would he bother with all the dinners and the charming act? I asked, my voice tight. Why not just a quick con? Because the reward is generational wealth, Mrs. Harrison, she explained, tapping her pen on the table. He knows a quick score gets him a small amount of money and jail time. A long con, ending in a legal marriage, gives him access to her retirement accounts, her portion of your estate when you pass, and the ability to liquidate everything gradually. He's playing for the whole house. The thought sickened me, but it clarified Ryan's meticulous performance. I handed her the comprehensive notes I had compiled. Ryan's supposed graduation year from a non-disclosed elite university, his claimed hometown in upstate New York, his firm's website URL, and the vague names of his supposed high-net-worth clientele. "I need you to verify everything, Detective Miller," I said, meeting her gaze. "Every detail. I need to know who Ryan Sterling really is." "I'll start digging tonight, Mrs. Harrison," she promised. "The more detail he gives, the more holes we'll find. Men like this are excellent at lying, but terrible at consistency." Over the following 2 weeks, Detective Miller's findings began to trickle in, confirming every chilling instinct I had. First, the education claim. No record of a Ryan Michael Sterling attending a non-disclosed elite university in that graduating class, or any other, Detective Miller reported during our phone check-in. He might have toured the campus or downloaded a catalog, but he never matriculated. The name of the residential college he mentioned is also incorrect for that year. Next, the background. Ryan had claimed a comfortable, almost patrician upbringing in a specific suburb of upstate New York. Detective Miller ran property and school records. The home address he gave belongs to a retired couple named Petrov, who have owned it for 30 years. No records of a Sterling family ever residing there. He has zero traceable history in that region. Then came the professional background. As I suspected, Ryan Sterling Investment Consulting was nothing more than a ghost entity. "It's a professionally designed website registered through a shell service in Panama," Detective Miller explained. "No legitimate business license, no SEC registration, and critically, his credit history only goes back 4 years. Before that, Ryan Sterling simply did not exist on paper." 4 years. The timing was chilling. It suggested a recent identity change or a release from a prior legal entanglement. Most disturbing, Detective Miller continued, is the discovery of a Bradford Thompson, same age, similar physical description, who was arrested in a non-disclosed Western state 3 years ago for investment fraud. The charges were dropped when the victims, 2 women he was romantically involved with, suddenly refused to testify. The pattern is almost identical. Bradford Thompson. The name felt like a punch to the gut. While we couldn't prove it was the same person, the coincidence was too terrifying to ignore. Coincidence isn't proof, and I couldn't present Julia with a "maybe it's him" mugshot and expect a wedding cancellation. I needed absolute evidence. I knew the con was entering its next critical phase. With his background exposed as entirely fabricated, Ryan needed to secure his physical position closer to the assets and closer to Julia. 3 months into their relationship, the announcement came. Julia brought Ryan to my house, beaming, for a casual Tuesday dinner. "Mom, we have news!" Julia gushed, practically bouncing in her chair. "Ryan found the most amazing place. We're moving in together next month." "That's wonderful, honey," I said, forcing a warm, motherly smile. "Where is the house?" "It's a beautiful colonial in Northwood Heights," she said, showing me pictures on her phone. Northwood Heights was the most affluent area of Willow Creek. It's a rental, perfect for testing domestic life. The best part? Ryan knows the landlord, so we're getting the place way below market rate. Another great deal. Ryan, had remarkably lucky connections willing to offer expensive discounts. I recognized the tactic. Ryan was securing a high-value address on a minimal budget, positioning himself perfectly within the social sphere he pretended to inhabit. Looking at the photos of the clearly expensive home, I felt a fresh wave of nausea. This wasn't just a rental, it was reconnaissance. He was integrating himself into Julia's reality, ready for the engagement and the final strike. "I'm so happy for you both," I managed. That night, alone for the first time in months, I realized the full gravity of the situation. Julia was not just blinded by love. She was being maneuvered like a pawn on a chessboard. Her financial future, her emotional well-being, everything was at stake. I called Detective Miller immediately. "The timeline is accelerating," I told her, my voice low and firm. "He just moved in. He'll propose next. We need to find the victims from a non-disclosed Western state." I wasn't a mother hoping her instincts were wrong anymore. I was an investigator, and my goal was to save my daughter. The long game had entered its final, most dangerous quarter. 3 months after Julia moved in with Ryan, they announced their engagement at my Sunday dinner table. I should have been thrilled. Julia glowed, truly radiant with happiness. The ring was undeniably gorgeous. Ryan seemed genuinely elated, playing the role of the devoted, slightly nervous fiancé to perfection. Instead, I felt like I was watching the climax of a perfectly choreographed play, and I was the only audience member who knew the script. "Mom, look!" Julia practically shoved her hand in my face, where a stunning, perfectly cut, solitaire diamond caught the dining room light. "At least 2 carats. It's absolutely real, and he chose it himself." "Beautiful, honey," I said, honestly, forcing my voice to project only joy. The ring was lovely, but it was also astonishingly expensive, easily costing more than my non-disclosed luxury sedan. More money than someone claiming to be an independent investment consultant, without a single verifiable client, should be able to afford. Ryan beamed proudly. "I wanted something worthy of Julia," he said, gazing into her eyes like they were the only 2 people in the house. "She deserves the best." The romantic in me briefly melted, a painful reminder of Robert. The investigator in me immediately wondered where he had gotten the capital for a ring that likely cost him 6 figures. "How did you manage to find something so perfect, Ryan?" I asked innocently, holding my smile steady. "A friend in the non-disclosed precious metals business," Ryan said smoothly, never breaking eye contact with Julia. "A client had returned the stone due to a breakup, and I got a significant deal on the cost. Another one of those incredibly lucky connections." Another great deal. Ryan had remarkably lucky connections with people who offered expensive items at deep discounts. Either he was the luckiest man in Willow Creek, or he was incredibly good at finding people willing to participate in something shady. Or worse, he had liquidated something illicit to buy the ring as a strategic investment. But Julia radiated such pure, blinding happiness that I hugged them both and opened a bottle of rare, a non-disclosed sparkling wine I had saved for just such an occasion. We toasted their future while I ignored the deafening alarm bells ringing in my head. Over the following weeks, wedding planning consumed Julia's life. She approached the details with the intensity of a marketing campaign, creating elaborate spreadsheets for everything from the flowers to the seating charts. Ryan was the perfect supportive fiancé, agreeing with her choices and suggesting helpful vendors. Vendors who always seemed to offer him deep deals. "Ryan knows someone doing the catering for almost half the usual price," Julia told me excitedly during a planning session. "And his friend gets wholesale flowers. We are saving so much money. I was convinced that Ryan Sterling knew many people willing to work below market rates. Either he was incredibly well connected, or he was incredibly good at finding people participating in fraudulent activity. Meanwhile, Detective Miller had been busy. Her findings were not just interesting, they were terrifying. We tracked down 2 women in a non-disclosed Western state who had relationships with a man matching Ryan Sterling's description around the time of those Bradford Thompson investment fraud charges, Detective Miller reported during a discreet meeting in my parked car. Both women lost significant investment capital, over $500,000 combined. The pattern is almost identical. Charming man appears, becomes the perfect boyfriend, gains financial access, and vanishes with everything portable. But he's marrying Julia, I pointed out, my voice thin. Why go through the trouble of a wedding if he's planning to disappear? Detective Miller looked grim. Marriage gives him immediate legal access to more capital. Her retirement accounts, her liquid savings, and the legal standing to liquidate assets if you were to become incapacitated. The wedding isn't the end of his con, Mrs. Harrison. It's the next phase. It's a legal gateway. The thought sickened me. He wasn't just dating Julia. He was positioning himself to take everything she had, legally and irrevocably. I needed proof, not suspicions, not coincidences, but actual evidence that would convince Julia her perfect fiancé was a criminal fraudster. Ryan was excellent at his reconnaissance phase. During family dinners, he'd casually steer the conversation toward our family finances. How much were Robert's engineering patents worth, Mrs. Harrison, if you don't mind me asking? He'd inquire, framed as polite interest. Had you considered refinancing the house for a low interest rate? Is Julia maximizing her retirement contributions? He framed everything as helpful concern, but I noticed he was building a comprehensive, detailed picture of our family assets, showing particular, intense interest in the details of the Robert Harrison Memorial Trust, the foundation of Julia's wealth. You know, he said one evening, while Julia was using the restroom, settling closer to me on the sofa. Julia mentioned she's been very conservative with her initial investments. With the wedding coming and our future ahead, maybe it's time for a more aggressive portfolio management style. Aggressive how? I asked, keeping my tone non-committal. I'm developing a private real estate investment opportunity, he pitched, his eyes gleaming with ambition. Nothing risky, just commercial property. Specifically, a non-disclosed luxury condo building likely to appreciate significantly over the coming years. Julia could get in early with her trust principal. The same fake investment he used on the women in the Western state. The panic was almost unbearable. Sounds complicated, I said, rising smoothly to collect dessert plates, creating physical distance between us. Julia prefers simple investments. That's exactly the problem, Ryan said earnestly, not catching the warning in my voice. Simple investments don't build real wealth. Julia's smart, but she's played too safe. With proper guidance, her inheritance could double in 5 years. Or disappear entirely, I thought, walking into the kitchen. The wedding was set for June, giving me 3 months to determine what Ryan Sterling was really planning and, more importantly, to prove it. When someone seems too good to be true, has an answer for everything, and their story has truck-sized holes, they are usually hiding something immense. The question was, what was he hiding? And how much damage would he do before I exposed him? The engagement ring and the move to Northwood Heights were the unmistakable signals that Ryan was accelerating his timeline. I knew the fraudulent real estate investment opportunity was his first major financial play, designed to extract the most liquid capital immediately. During the next Sunday dinner, which felt less like a family gathering and more like a surveillance operation, Julia casually dropped the bomb. Mom, she said, holding up a delicate, a non-disclosed luxury brand napkin she had been using to dab at her mouth. Ryan and I finally pulled the trigger on that Colorado Springs investment. It's so exciting. We got the paperwork finalized this week. My blood ran cold. I almost dropped the gravy boat. You finalized the investment? I managed, my voice strained but carefully controlled. What exactly did you finalize, honey? That amazing opportunity in a non-disclosed affluent western city, the luxury condos, she explained, her eyes shining with the excitement of a new shared adventure. Ryan says the returns could be incredible, and since we're marrying anyway, it made sense to start consolidating our financial future immediately. We'll be partners in the development. He's so good at this. I managed a faint smile. That sounds significant, Julia. How much of your trust principal did you allocate to this venture? Julia shrugged carelessly, still focused on planning the seating chart in her mind. Most of it, I guess. About $400,000. But Ryan says we could double that in 2 years. Imagine the down payment we could make on a permanent house then. $400,000. Julia's entire inheritance from Robert, the secure foundation her father had meticulously built for her, was gone. Handed over in one investment decision to a man whose background was completely fabricated, based solely on his word and his practiced charm. Julia, I said, leaning forward, my voice dropping to a low, careful register. That is a vast sum of money. Did a separate, independent attorney review the investment documents before you signed them? Julia's expression shifted instantly from excitement to mild irritation. The first time she had ever shown resentment toward my advice. Mom, Ryan is the professional. This is what he does. He handled all the legal review. He has a whole team. I trust him completely. Please don't try to make this complicated. Trust. The shield that con artists rely on more than any financial loophole. That night, I called Detective Miller, my hands shaking as I gave her the details. He got the $400,000, I told her. I need you to dig deeper into this specific development and track the money trail now. Detective Miller's findings confirmed my absolute worst fears and made them look optimistic. Mrs. Harrison, Detective Miller reported 2 days later, her voice professional and grim, there is no record of any active real estate development matching that description in a non-disclosed affluent western city. The company Ryan supposedly used, Sterling and Associates Commercial Ventures, does not exist in any public or corporate registry. The property address he gave leads to an empty commercial lot that has been for sale by the city for 7 years. So where is the money? I whispered, staring at the wedding invitation proofs Julia had left on my counter. Based on the preliminary bank records I accessed through my contacts, which your daughter willingly provided to him, the money was transferred from the Robert Harrison Memorial Trust into an account solely controlled by Ryan, then immediately dispersed in 4 separate wire transfers to multiple offshore accounts in the non-disclosed Caribbean island nation. The money is gone. Eleanor, all of it. I sat in my kitchen, staring at the delicate calligraphy on the invitation. Julia Elizabeth Harrison and Ryan Michael Sterling request the pleasure of your company. Ryan Thompson Sterling had stolen my daughter's entire financial security, and she had no idea. The wedding was 8 weeks away. I considered going to the police, but what could I tell them? That my daughter voluntarily handed over a massive sum to her fiancé for an investment that turned out to be fraudulent? Without irrefutable proof of intent to defraud, it would look like a failed business deal between consenting adults. I considered confronting Ryan directly, but that would give him the opportunity to disappear immediately, making the financial recovery impossible and leaving Julia devastated and betrayed. I was becoming convinced that the wedding itself was not his exit strategy. It was merely the next phase of the con. If Ryan married Julia, he would gain immediate legal access to more assets, her retirement accounts, her portion of my own estate when I died, and the ability to legally liquidate everything she inherited or earned during their marriage. The wedding wasn't his con's end. It was the gateway to total financial control. I had to stop it. But how do you convince someone the man they love is a criminal when they are wearing his expensive ring and planning their perfect future? I decided to set one more trap, a financial bait he couldn't resist. If Ryan was a professional con artist, I thought, he wouldn't be able to resist an opportunity for more money, especially if he thought he was about to gain permanent access to a new family resource through marriage. So I started dropping carefully calculated fictional hints about a supposed significant inheritance I was expecting from a distant relative. Aunt Lillian was always the family eccentric, I casually mentioned to Julia and Ryan during dinner, making sure I looked preoccupied with mock paperwork. I never expected her to remember me in her will, but apparently she left me something quite substantial. Lawyers say it could be worth over $1 million. Ryan's interest was immediate and intense. His smooth composure wavered for a split second, replaced by pure, naked greed. "That is wonderful news, Mrs. Harrison," he said, regaining his composure instantly. "Unexpected inheritances can truly change a family's financial picture." "The lawyers want to meet next week to discuss the details," I continued, feeding him the bait. "Something about tax implications and, naturally, investment strategies. I would be happy to review any documents for you," Ryan offered smoothly, practically vibrating with excitement. "These situations can be complex, and you want to ensure you're making the right decisions." There it was. Ryan Sterling offering to help me manage money that did not exist. Over the following weeks, I fed Ryan carefully constructed details about my fake inheritance. The fictional amount grew in my stories, and his attention grew along with it. He started asking pointed questions about my estate planning, whether I had updated my will recently, and how I was thinking about leaving assets to Julia. "You know," he said one evening, his arm casually around Julia, "after Julia and I marry, it might make sense for us to consolidate some of the financial planning. Family trusts can be very tax efficient." Family trusts controlled by Ryan, no doubt. The wedding was 4 weeks away. I had secured the ultimate bait, but I still needed the smoking gun, the confession. I knew where the money was and who he really was. Now I needed to catch him in the act of confession. Time was running out. The wedding was just 3 weeks away, and Ryan's greed, fueled by the fictional Aunt Lillian inheritance, was reaching a fever pitch. He was now constantly asking me about the tax implications and offering to smooth out the paperwork. He was tightening his financial noose, completely unaware that he was walking into a trap baited with imaginary money. I needed the evidence that was irrefutable, not circumstantial coincidences or the testimony of long-ago victims, but Ryan's own voice confessing the fraud. I called Detective Miller and explained the necessity. "We need a recording, Sarah. Something with his voice, stating his intentions. I need the equivalent of a signed confession." Detective Miller paused on the line. "Mrs. Harrison, that crosses a significant legal threshold. Placing a listening device, even in his car—" "I understand the risks, Detective," I cut in, my voice low and steady. "So is stealing $400,000 from my daughter, and so is exploiting her emotional vulnerability. I am willing to take risks that protect my family from a professional criminal. If I don't get this proof, the marriage happens, and the legal cleanup will cost more than any fine I might face." Detective Miller had law enforcement contacts, and she put me in touch with a former colleague specializing in surveillance equipment. 2 days later, I was in a sterile office receiving a small, highly advanced recording device, tiny, magnetic, and completely undetectable unless you knew exactly where to look. It was designed to pick up all conversations inside the vehicle. I need a clean audio file, I instructed Detective Miller. Proof that he engineered the loss of Julia's money and that the marriage is merely a means to an end. I figured if Ryan was truly the calculated con artist type, he would eventually discuss his timeline and his exit strategy with his best man or another associate, maybe while driving to the wedding venue. That was my only window. That evening, I drove to the Northwood Heights rental house under the pretense of dropping off final wedding guest RSVPs. While Julia and Ryan were distracted on the back patio arguing affectionately over the color of the linens, I executed the plan. I slipped out to the driveway where Ryan's a non-disclosed luxury sedan was parked, popped the hood, I'd watched a video tutorial on YouTube, and swiftly affixed the magnetic recorder deep inside the chassis cavity near the engine block. The trap was set. For 2 days, the recordings were the most tedious listening sessions imaginable. Ryan talking to wedding vendors about seating charts, mundane phone calls with unidentifiable people, and, most frequently, singing along to the non-disclosed popular artist on the radio. Either he was the most innocent man alive, or he was extremely careful about where he conducted sensitive conversations. I was beginning to doubt the plan, the tension making me frantic. Had he gotten suspicious? Had he somehow found the device? Then, 3 days before the wedding, I hit the jackpot. Ryan was driving to a luncheon with his best man, a nervous-looking guy named Danny Vance, whom I'd met only briefly. Their conversation was very enlightening. "You sure about the timeline, Ryan?" Danny asked, his voice sounding tight and nervous on the recording. "Seems like you're cutting it awful close." "The wedding's Saturday," Ryan replied, his voice calm, confident, and utterly devoid of emotion. "Soon as we're legally married, Danny, I'll have access to everything. The trust accounts, the retirement funds, plus whatever the old lady leaves her when she dies. I've been feeding her the details on the Aunt Lillian inheritance. She's absolutely buying it." "What about the 400 you already wired out?" Danny pressed. Ryan laughed, a cold, short, joyless sound. "That was just the appetizer, man. The real money comes after the marriage. Give me 6 months cleaning out everything I can access. Then I'll file for divorce and disappear. Julia will be too embarrassed to come after me. Seriously." The audio played back in my kitchen, filling the silence of the empty house. The details were clinical. The plan was terrifying. But the worst part, the part that turned my fear into pure, incandescent rage, came next. Danny asked the crucial question. "And if she figures it out before then? Julia seems pretty smart." "She won't," Ryan said dismissively. "Julia's completely under the spell. She thinks I'm Prince Charming and her mother's just a suspicious old bat. I played the long game, Danny. By the time either of them realizes what's happening, I'll be long gone with everything they have." He paused, then added the line that broke my heart and fueled my final necessary action. "The best part is, she's so desperate to be married that she'd probably forgive me even if she did find out. Her dad died when she was young, and she's got major abandonment issues. She'll do anything to keep from being alone again." I sat in my chair, staring at the small speaker, tears of fury, not sorrow, streaming down my face. Talking about stealing our money was one thing, but psychoanalyzing my daughter's deepest vulnerabilities while planning to ruthlessly exploit them? Ryan Sterling had just crossed a line he could never come back from. I stopped the recording. The audio file was pristine, a clear, undeniable confession of investment fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy to commit marital fraud. The smoking gun. Ryan Sterling was about to learn what happens when you mess with a mother's child. But I needed more than just a recording. I needed to catch him in the act, in front of a church full of witnesses, leaving no doubt about his true character. The wedding was 3 days away. Time to orchestrate the ultimate public downfall of a professional con artist who thought he was smarter than everyone else. I spent the next 3 days moving with cold, surgical precision. The recording was the evidence, but exposure required execution. The risk was immense. I was potentially exposing myself to wiretapping charges, but the alternative, allowing Ryan to legally ruin my daughter, was worse. I needed law enforcement to be ready, fully briefed, and positioned to act the moment I gave the signal. I contacted Detective Miller immediately after reviewing the confession. She was appalled by the brutality of Ryan's words regarding Julia's vulnerabilities. That level of cold calculation is rare, even for a professional fraudster, she noted grimly. Forget the wiretapping charges, Sarah, I told her, my voice unwavering. This man is committing grand larceny under the guise of marriage. We need to stop him before he says, I do. Once the legal contract is sealed, the situation becomes infinitely more complex. We are dealing with an intent to defraud that directly affects the legal standing of a marriage, which is a massive felony. Detective Miller agreed to leverage her most reliable contact, Detective Marcus Jones, of the non-disclosed County Police Economic Crimes Unit. This required an extra layer of secrecy. I purchased a disposable, non-disclosed brand burner phone for all communications with Detective Jones. We met in a parking garage downtown. Detective Jones was a large man with a weary, skeptical demeanor, clearly used to dealing with mothers making dramatic claims. Mrs. Harrison, he said, examining the transcript of Ryan's confession. The audio is damning regarding the $400,000 and the intent to commit further fraud. The problem is acting at a private ceremony. We need probable cause, and we need witnesses. The witnesses will be the entire congregation, Detective, I countered, pulling out a detailed map of the Willow Creek Community Chapel. I will be sending you the audio file moments before the ceremony starts, confirming my location. We need you to walk in when the minister asks for any objections, or immediately after the vows. The shock value is critical to ensure he doesn't try to flee or destroy evidence. I explained my strategy. The public, highly visible arrest would be the only thing powerful enough to shatter Julia's emotional investment in Ryan and give her the necessary outrage to fight him legally later. Detective Jones, after listening to the brief excerpt concerning the exploitation of Julia's abandonment issues, finally nodded, his skepticism replaced by professional distaste. We will have 2 plainclothes officers waiting outside the service entrance. You give the signal, Mrs. Harrison. We go in. The final piece of the legal puzzle was in place. The police would be there, ready to act on my signal. The next critical step was securing the environment of the ceremony itself. Weddings are rigid events built on tradition and timing. An interruption, even by police, could be drowned out or delayed, giving Ryan a chance to slip away. I needed the officiant, Minister Thorne, to be my ally. Minister Thorne was a kind man, a longtime friend of the Harrison family who had presided over Robert's funeral and Julia's baptism. He trusted me implicitly. I met him late one evening at the chapel, under the pretense of finalizing the readings. Minister Thorne, I began, my hands clasped tightly. I need to make a highly specific and unusual request regarding the flow of the ceremony. He smiled kindly. Anything for Julia and Ryan, Eleanor. They seem like a lovely pair. I took a deep breath. It concerns the moment just before the final declaration, the traditional line about objections. Ah, speak now or forever. Hold your peace. He chuckled gently. A formality these days. Exactly. I need you to be prepared for an interruption at that exact moment, Minister. A significant, disruptive interruption. It will involve the police and potentially the exposure of a crime that goes back years. Minister Thorne's smile vanished. His face went pale. Eleanor, are you suggesting? I am not suggesting, Minister. I am confirming, I said firmly, meeting his gaze. I cannot provide details right now, as any leak could be disastrous, but you have my absolute word. This man, Ryan Sterling, is a professional criminal who has already stolen Julia's inheritance and is attempting to marry her for legal access to the rest of her assets. I have the proof. Irrefutable proof. My goodness, he whispered, looking utterly shaken. My request is simple. When I stand, or when any disruption occurs immediately following that line, I need you to stop the ceremony. Do not proceed to the I do. Delay the proceedings for any reason you can contrive, but do not allow them to be legally married until the matter is resolved. Can you promise me that, Minister? Minister Thorne looked at the map of the chapel, then at the altar, then finally at my determined face. He knew me. He knew Robert. And he knew I was not a woman given to melodrama. I trust you, Eleanor, he said, his voice now firm. I will do what is necessary to protect Julia. I will delay the ceremony. You tell me what I need to say. Just be ready, I said, a wave of relief washing over me. And trust my judgment. This is the only way to save her life. The night before the wedding, I made the final call to Julia. I needed to hear her voice one last time before the bomb dropped. I'm so nervous, Mom, Julia said, her voice bubbling with a mixture of excitement and exhaustion. But also, I've never been happier. I still can't believe tomorrow I'll be Mrs. Sterling. A sharp pain pierced my chest. Mrs. Sterling, the name that represented her destruction. Are you absolutely sure about this, honey? I asked, putting my head back against the kitchen cabinet, closing my eyes. I was giving her one last chance to express doubt, to give me an honorable escape route. I've never been more sure of anything, Julia said, her voice firm and true. Ryan is everything I've ever wanted in a husband. I'm the luckiest woman alive. He's already talking about helping you manage the Aunt Lillian money, Mom. He thinks the world of us. That last sentence, the lie about Ryan thinking the world of us, hardened my resolve completely. I remembered Ryan's cold analysis of her father's death and her major abandonment issues. He wasn't marrying her for love. He was exploiting her grief. I love you, Julia, I said, my voice thick with unshed tears. Whatever happens tomorrow, remember this. Everything I do, every action I take, is because I love you fiercely. You deserve the best, and you deserve truth. I love you too, Mom, Julia replied cheerfully. Don't be nervous. Tomorrow is going to be perfect. If only she knew. The wedding morning dawned bright and clear over Willow Creek. Perfect weather for what was about to become the most dramatic and necessary ceremony in the town's history. I got dressed, choosing a formidable professional outfit. My purse contained the burner phone, the original recording device, and the direct number to Detective Jones. The time for planning was over. The time for the reckoning had arrived. The wedding morning dawned bright and clear over Willow Creek. The sun streamed through the stained glass windows of the Willow Creek Community Chapel, promising a day of perfection. Everything was magazine perfect. The white, non-disclosed flower arrangements, the soft candlelight, the guests arriving in their finest attire. I drove to the church meticulously, the atmosphere of celebration thick and suffocating. I had chosen an outfit that was appropriately elegant but also formidable. A structured suit in a deep emerald green, suitable for both a wedding and a high-stakes confrontation. My purse, a large, rigid clutch, contained my necessary tools. The non-disclosed brand burner phone programmed with the direct number for Detective Marcus Jones, and the recording device, my silent witness. Julia was in the bridal suite, finishing her makeup. When I saw her, my heart fractured slightly. She looked ethereal in her wedding dress, radiant, breathtakingly happy, and tragically, utterly unaware of the abyss she was walking toward. Ryan, in his bespoke tuxedo, was every inch the devoted groom. Handsome, appropriately nervous, and exchanging perfectly timed smiles with the guests. If I hadn't heard his cold, clinical voice discussing my daughter's financial destruction, I might have, for a fleeting second, thought I was wrong about everything. But I had heard him. And in a few hours, everyone else would too. I took my seat in the front pew next to Robert's closest friend, my mind racing through the plan one last time. At 3:45 p.m., exactly 15 minutes before the ceremony was scheduled to begin, I excused myself, claiming a sudden headache and needing a moment of air. What I actually did was walk around to the church's less-used side entrance, where the wedding party's cars were discreetly parked. I found Ryan exactly where I hoped he would be, standing beside his non-disclosed luxury sedan, his posture indicating privacy, speaking urgently into his cell phone. He was making his final pre-game confirmation. "Danny, it's me," Ryan was saying, his voice low but sharp with adrenaline. "Yeah, 20 minutes. I'll officially be married to my retirement fund." He laughed, that same cold, joyless sound from the recording. "Trust me, this girl is so naive, she'll sign anything I put in front of her. I already got her to put most of her liquid savings into that fake investment. Once we're married, I have legal access to her retirement accounts, and I can start working on the mother's assets too." He paused, listening to Danny's reply. "The old lady's house is worth a solid $700K, plus whatever she's got in savings from the life insurance and that ridiculous Aunt Lillian inheritance I created. Give me 6 months max, and I can clean out everything they have. No one will suspect a loving husband." "What if they get suspicious?" Danny's voice was audible through the speaker. "They won't," Ryan repeated with utter confidence. "Julia thinks I walk on water. And even if the mother starts asking questions, who's the jury going to believe? The new dedicated husband, or the suspicious, recently widowed old woman who's confused about her finances? By the time anyone figures out what's happening, I'll be in a non-disclosed island nation with a new identity. Just make sure the final transfer authorizations are ready for Monday morning." That was more than enough. I discreetly pulled out the burner phone and captured the last 30 seconds of his monologue as irrefutable, time-stamped evidence. The worst part, the psychoanalysis, came next, confirming the emotional cruelty. The best part is, Julia's so desperate for a family structure, she'd probably forgive me even if she did find out. Her dad died when she was young, and she's got major abandonment issues. She'll do anything to keep from being alone again. My vision swam red. Ryan Sterling had used my husband's death as part of his strategy. I stopped the recording. I looked at the digital clock on my phone. 3:55 p.m. The music was about to start. I sent the text to Detective Marcus Jones. It is time, now, alive. I walked back into the chapel and took my seat just as the organist began playing the processional music. The ceremony was a blur of perfectly executed choreography. The bridesmaids, the maid of honor, and then the music swelled, announcing Julia's entrance. She walked down the aisle on her godfather's arm, a painful reminder that Robert wasn't there to protect her. She was incandescent with happiness, and the love in her eyes when she reached Ryan was genuine, unmistakable, and tragic. Ryan played the devoted groom flawlessly. He looked appropriately moved and whispered something to Julia that made her smile. Minister Thorne began the ceremony with the traditional words, "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to witness the joining of Julia Elizabeth Harrison and Ryan Michael Sterling in holy matrimony." I listened, my body a statue of tension, watching Ryan's practiced performance. They exchanged the vows they had written themselves, Julia's heartfelt, Ryan's perfectly crafted to sound romantic while committing to nothing specific. They exchanged rings. We were approaching the climax. If anyone present knows of any reason why this couple should not be joined in marriage, Minister Thorne said, reaching the traditional inflection point, his voice trembling slightly, remembering our private conversation, let them speak now or forever hold their peace. This was it, my moment. I started to rise, my heart pounding against my ribs, ready to stand and expose the monster. But before I could fully stand, before I could say a word, and before Ryan could even shift his weight, the heavy oak doors at the back of the chapel burst open. Two men in dark, severe suits, plainclothes officers, walked quickly and purposefully down the central aisle, followed immediately by Detective Marcus Jones, who was holding his badge wallet open. The processional music died instantly. A collective gasp rippled through the hundreds of guests. Detective Jones walked straight to the altar, stopping directly in front of a stunned Ryan. "Bradford Michael Thompson," Detective Jones said, his voice ringing with cold authority, replacing the minister's gentle tone. "You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit felony grand larceny and multiple counts of wire fraud. You have the right to remain silent." The color drained from Ryan's face. His carefully constructed mask shattered into a million pieces. The smooth confidence vanished, replaced by sheer, desperate panic. He looked directly at me, a fleeting look of utter betrayal and calculating hatred, realizing his fatal error had been underestimating the suspicious old bat. Ryan didn't try to run. He just stood there, paralyzed in his perfect tuxedo. The click of the handcuffs was the loudest sound in the entire chapel. The sound of the handcuffs clicking shut echoed in the profound, stunned silence of the Willow Creek Community Chapel. The moment Ryan was led away by the two plainclothes officers, still frozen in his look of shock and hatred, was the single most satisfying moment of my entire life. But satisfaction quickly gave way to the inevitable disaster. Julia. She stood at the altar, her beautiful dress contrasting cruelly with the chaos. She watched her perfect fiancé being escorted down the aisle by police, her face a mask of utter devastation. When the doors closed and the guests began to murmur frantically, Julia slowly turned, her eyes finding mine. They were filled not with love, nor even shock, but with a terrifying, blank confusion. Minister Thorne, remembering my instructions, cleared his throat loudly. "The ceremony is officially postponed. I apologize to all our guests. Please remain calm." I walked toward the altar, ignoring the sea of confused, whispering faces. I reached Julia and took her ice-cold hands in mine. "Mom," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "What? What just happened? Who was that man?" "His name is Bradford Thompson, honey," I said, keeping my voice firm and low, cutting through the shock. "He's a criminal, and I just saved your life." Julia shook her head, tears finally starting to track paths through her perfectly applied makeup. "No, Ryan wouldn't. He loves me. The ring, the house, the investment." "The house was a cheap rental to give him status," I interrupted gently but firmly. "The ring was bought with illicit funds. And the investment, Julia, the $400,000 you gave him, is gone. It was transferred to offshore accounts 4 days ago. The luxury condo development doesn't exist. It was a lie he used on 2 other victims before he met you." I held her gaze, letting the brutal truth sink in. She deserved the truth, however painful. I told her the short version of the private investigation, the fake upstate New York background, the non-disclosed elite university claim, and the stolen identity. I finished by saying, "He wasn't marrying you for love, sweetie. He was marrying you for legal access to the rest of your trust fund and my estate." Detective Jones took me and Julia into the minister's study, away from the frantic guests. He brought Ryan's best man, Danny Vance, in a few minutes later. Danny was quickly giving a statement about his limited but incriminating knowledge of Ryan's plan. Julia sat silently, numbly, until Detective Jones brought out the recording device. "Julia," I said, putting a hand on her knee, "I am going to play the last conversation I recorded between Ryan and his accomplice. You need to hear this. It explains everything." I pressed play, and the study was filled with Ryan's confident, callous voice, the perfect audio evidence of his intent to defraud, his plan to vanish, and his casual mention of cleaning out everything they have. Then came the line that I knew would completely shatter the last vestiges of Julia's belief in him. "The best part is, she's so desperate for a family structure. She'd probably forgive me even if she did find out. Her dad died when she was young, and she's got major abandonment issues. She'll do anything to keep from being alone again." Julia stood up so quickly her chair tumbled backwards. The tears stopped, replaced by an expression of pure, concentrated fury and disgust. The pain was still there, but now it was overshadowed by an anger that was entirely her own. "He used Dad," she whispered, her voice shaking. "He used my grief." "Yes, honey. He did," I confirmed, standing beside her. "He saw your vulnerability as an opportunity for profit." Julia turned to Detective Jones. "What happens to him now, Detective?" "We have the audio, the money trail to the offshore accounts, and the testimony of his accomplice, who is cooperating," Detective Jones replied professionally. "He's going away for a very long time, Julia, and we will fight to recover what little we can of your $400,000. Julia looked at me, and the last remnants of resentment and doubt evaporated. "Thank you, Mom," she said, her voice raw. "You were right all along. You saved me." Ryan Sterling, now confirmed as Bradford Thompson, was taken to the non-disclosed county jail. Julia and I spent the rest of the day with Detective Jones, giving official statements and providing the necessary documents to freeze any further financial movement. The wedding guests were sent home with a terse note from the minister explaining an unforeseen family emergency of legal consequence. That night, Julia didn't cry. She sat at my kitchen table, going through her finances with a cold, almost clinical focus, determining the exact tally of her loss. The shock had given way to an urgent desire for control. "I need to contact the lawyer for the trust," she stated, looking up from her ledger. "I need to ensure he never gets access to any of my retirement accounts, even hypothetically." I watched her, the resilient woman Robert and I had raised. The heartbreak was immense, but the loss of money, the betrayal of her father's memory, was what truly hardened her resolve. "I have already secured a top financial fraud attorney, Julia," I told her, placing a cup of tea in front of her. "We will fight for everything he took, but the most important thing you recovered today was your future. The price of that betrayal was his freedom. And that, my dear, is the ultimate tally." We sat in silence, the glow of the kitchen light on her set jaw. The battle was won, but the healing had just begun. The long game had ended in a decisive, devastating victory for the mother who trusted her instincts. The days immediately following the arrest were filled not with tears, but with cold, hard work. Julia, 30 Toy, did not grieve the loss of a husband. She grieved the loss of her financial innocence and the betrayal of her deepest hopes. The shock had quickly metabolized into a fierce, protective resolve. Instead of a honeymoon in a non-disclosed luxury destination, Julia took a seat in the office of Mrs. Evelyn Reed, a top financial fraud attorney I had secured through Robert's old legal contacts. Julia was transformed. She wore a severe, businesslike suit, her hair pulled back tightly. She was meticulously organized, presenting Attorney Reed with every document Ryan had ever given her, every bank statement, and every email related to the fake, a non-disclosed luxury condo building investment. "I need to secure a temporary restraining order against every asset he still controls, Attorney Reed," Julia stated, her voice steady and clear. "I want to ensure he doesn't use any remaining capital for his legal defense. We also need to join the other 2 victims from a non-disclosed Western state in a civil suit to recover the $400,000. I sat beside her, simply providing logistical support and quiet strength. This was Julia's fight now, and she was owning it. Ryan Sterling, or rather Bradford Thompson, made one fatal miscalculation, Julia, Attorney Reed said, tapping the transcript of the audio recording. "He thought you were a passive victim. Your mother's quick action, combined with this confession, changes the narrative completely. This goes from a complex civil matter to a clear-cut case of felony wire fraud and conspiracy. His primary focus will be staying out of federal prison, not fighting you in civil court." Julia nodded, her jaw set. "Then we focus on my life insurance fund and my retirement accounts. I want them secured beyond any legal doubt. He is never touching my money again." I watched her, profoundly proud. My daughter had lost money, yes, but she had gained an ironclad resilience that no amount of wealth could buy. 2 weeks later, the legal hammer fell on Bradford Thompson. I received a final update from Detective Marcus Jones. "Mrs. Harrison, Thompson's bail was officially denied. Given the clear audio evidence of premeditation, the offshore money trail, and the exploitation of familial relationships, the prosecutor is pushing for the maximum sentence." The judge took a dim view of his major abandonment issues comment, particularly. "And the charge of marrying for financial gain?" I asked, needing the final confirmation. "Conspiracy to commit marital fraud and felony larceny. Your actions, though legally aggressive, were determined to be a necessary, justifiable defense against a known financial predator. The recording was the key. You saved your daughter from complete financial ruin, Eleanor. You should be proud." Thompson was remanded without bail, awaiting trial. He had lost everything: his freedom, his carefully constructed identity, the $400,000, likely irrecoverable but frozen, and his reputation. The Willow Creek social circuit, initially scandalized, quickly united in disgust at the level of calculated betrayal. As for the fictional Aunt Lillian inheritance, the money that served as bait, I took that imaginary capital and, instead of investing it for myself, used it to establish the Robert Harrison Financial Vigilance Fund. It was a small, non-profit foundation dedicated to providing discreet financial literacy and security checks for young, successful women in Willow Creek entering serious relationships. The fund's motto: trust love, verify assets. 1 year later, the large house in Willow Creek felt quieter now, not empty, but tranquil. Julia had moved back home temporarily, and the wedding invitations had been burned in a cleansing ceremony in the backyard fireplace. She had since returned to her marketing career, but her life had a new focus. Julia had started the Tally Project, a successful, discreet online community for women who had survived financial fraud in relationships. It wasn't about revenge, it was about resilience and education. She wasn't the grieving daughter anymore. She was a sought-after speaker on financial self-protection. I sat in Robert's leather armchair, looking out at the sunset over my non-disclosed heritage roses. I was 59 now, no longer the suspicious old bat, but the resolute matriarch. I picked up a framed photo from the side table, a picture of Robert and me from 20 years ago. I realized that Ryan Sterling's long game, designed to destroy my family's legacy, had ultimately failed. It had instead created a new legacy, a daughter hardened by fire, and a mother who had proven that intuition, when coupled with action, is the most powerful weapon against fraud. The ultimate tally was simple. Ryan Thompson, who saw people as numbers, was now confined by a cell's numbers. Julia, who had been blind, now had perfect clarity. And I, Eleanor Harrison, had found peace not in quiet retirement, but in eternal vigilance. The vigilance that saved my family. I smiled, a genuine, content smile. The long game had ended in a decisive, righteous victory. The ultimate tally was paid in full. Bradford Thompson lost his freedom, and Julia gained the truth. Always, always trust your gut. If you loved this story of justice served cold, hit like and subscribe. Share your secrets with us at womenstoriessegmail.com.